What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I'm Shaw Local Bears beat reporter Sean Hammond. He is Shaw Local's very own Michael Dwojak. We're here ready to talk some Bears football with you on a Thursday. I know it's weird. We usually try to do Monday and Friday, but I have a scheduling conflict tomorrow, so we're going a day early. We're just going to kind of go with the flow. Michael, how you doing on this Thursday morning?
I'm good. Turned me off a little bit off my schedule, but it's fine. I can adjust. I can adjust on the fly. I can do it.
We can adjust just like the Chicago Bears have to adjust on the fly
Well, I
during the
mean,
game.
well,
Uh,
Sean, I don't know if you want to make that comparison.
yeah, that would mean that we're going to score 0 points by
Yeah.
halftime,
Yeah.
as we saw them do yet again. We didn't. We'll briefly talk about this Vikings game. I don't think there's all that much to say, to be honest. But we didn't get to do a show on Monday. Michael, another scoreless first half. Frankly, another beatdown. They were never competitive in that game. Do you take anything away from this contest?
I think the biggest thing I take away from that game, other than being disappointed that that offense couldn't get, scoring or score in the first half, I think the biggest thing for me is I've grown more and more concerned about this roster the last couple weeks. The 49ers lost this loss. I feel like for much of the season, the blame has been Shane Waldron is bad. He's not good, right? Like it's Matt
Yeah.
Eberflus's fault. Like he's the reason why this team can't get over the hump. And then, I mean, you've seen the last couple games. They've been blown out. I know the score looked closer against the Vikings, and they had an opportunity to kind of, make it a game early in the second half on Monday. But I mean, Sean, look at this roster. I mean, let's focus on the offensive line and what happened on Monday, right? You had Ryan Poles selected Kieran Amagaji with his third round pick,
Mm-hmm.
and Kieran's a local kid. I'm not going to, put him on blast or anything, but like, I think when the pick happened, we were all kind of surprised and we were kind of like, oh, that feels like a project, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he hadn't played for a whole year. No disrespect to the Ivy League, but I mean, he played in the Ivy League, right? There's a difference of competing in the SEC, the Big Ten, the Power Four, than competing in the Ivy League. And that's not to say that players who play in the Ivy League can't compete in the NFL. That's not what I'm getting at. All I'm saying is when you have a guy like Huron who hasn't played in a year because of injuries and the competition that he has played isn't close to competing on a Monday night in Minnesota with Jonathan Grenard going against you. I mean, that just begs the question of just like, what are we doing here with this construction, right? You saw Huron, not have a tough day in a really tough spot. You saw Doug Kramer continuously come in as a fullback when you had a fullback earlier in the year and you decided to cut him, right? It's all disappointing. It's not great, but I just think that you look at this roster composition and you look at the last couple weeks and heading into this offseason, I think this is a good spot for any head coach who have the quarterback, I think. But when you look at the rest of the roster and how it's kind of composed, you're just kind of like, well, I don't feel great about this. Like the quarterback is there. There's some skill players, but there are a lot of things that need to be changed if this team wants to compete for a playoff spot next year.
Injuries cannot be an excuse. And
No.
look, every single team across the league is dealing with injuries by December. I tweeted this out during the game the other day, and I know the 49ers are in last place and they're not, this isn't their best year, but you're talking about a team that I said this last week when they lost to the 49ers, like when they lose their left tackle, when they lose Nick Bosa, when they lose Christian McCaffrey, like they're relatively okay.
Right.
And I know that they're not a team they might miss the playoffs this year. They're probably going to miss the playoffs. But you're talking about a franchise that has been to 4 of the last 5 NFC title games. And they're not bottoming out. They're not looking like a 3-win, 4-win football team right now. Like they're competitive in games. And you could say the same thing. The Lions with that defense, I mean, the sheer number of guys on IR is just insane.
It's
You look at the
insane.
list that Schefter tweeted out the other day with the latest news, and it's like the list goes on, and still those guys are right there at the top of the NFC. The Chiefs, how many wide receivers are they going to lose? Again and again through injury, through obviously they let Tyreek Hill go or traded him away, and all those things like. The good teams overcome the injuries, and the Bears aren't built to do that right now. Unfortunately, I don't blame Karan Amagaji. He was put in a bad situation. He didn't know he was starting until the day before. He didn't practice all week with the starters. That is just a terrible situation to throw a rookie into for his first start. Like you said, he was injured for the end of last season. He didn't play a game for a full calendar year. On top of that, he's coming from the Ivy League, and he didn't hardly have training camp. Like, he did not get back to full health until maybe the last week of training camp. That is just an unfair expectation for him to come in and to be what you're looking for in a starting left tackle. And I know you got to play the young guys. Like, at some point, you're out of playoff contention. So I do get that. At some point, you just got to throw them in there. You're not really getting much if you throw Larry Borum back in there. I don't imagine that they're going to re-sign him. He's in the last year of his rookie deal. If they do, like, it's to be a backup. And so, yeah, you might as well see what Karan can do. But unfortunately, that was a really tough place for him to come in and make his first start.
Yeah, that's kind of why, like, I don't really I'm not going to give it, like, I understand the argument of being like, he's an NFL player. Sure, he's a rookie. He needs to step up eventually, and he needs to get in there. Sure, I understand all that. I'm not trying to make all the excuses in the world for him, but it's just hard for me to kind of put the blame on Kieran, to put the blame on Doug Kramer. Yes, he should have, gone into the game, and, he should have, declared himself eligible and that sort of stuff. But why are we having Doug Kramer do this instead when you had a perfectly good fullback who's now with the Eagles and likely going to the playoffs, right? Like, it's just these types of decisions where I'm just kind of like, I'm conflicted because, like, it does come down to the players. It comes down to the execution and that kind of stuff. But then, like, when you're asking these players to do these types of things that they're probably not prepared for, like the Kieran thing, like, I kind of compare it to all the talk about, like, Mitchell Trubisky, like, a few years ago, right? Like, Mitchell Trubisky didn't draft himself with the number 2 overall pick, right? But he obviously got all the pressure and all that sort of stuff. That's just bad decision making. And I think that kind of comes down to what happened with, Kieran being placed in that spot where you're just like, well, maybe he shouldn't have been a 3rd round pick. Maybe you do believe in his, his potential and that sort of stuff, but you need to let him develop, or you need to have someone else in there where you don't throw him into the lions. So, yeah, I mean, that's just to answer your question from the beginning. That's my biggest takeaway. I have a lot of issues with the way this roster has been constructed. I know a lot of people have those issues at this point, but I don't know what the quick fixes are, because if you look at the offensive line, Darnell Wright is probably the only guy who's probably returning next year that you feel confident about what he can potentially mean to your future.
Here's one other thought on the Karan thing too. Like, before we address that, like I said, I'm okay with playing your young guys.
Sure.
But if you find out the day before the game, like, why wouldn't you go with your veteran backup who's played 30, 40 games? I forget how many Larry Borum has played. Like, if you're going to have a youth movement and throw in your rookie tackle out of Yale, you want him to have a full week of practice with the starters. It was just setting him up for failure.
Yeah. And like,
I question that,
Yeah, and just doing it at Minnesota too. Like, you could have very easily put in Larry Borum, and obviously concussions are very different for each person, so it depends. But you likely are not going to see Braxton Jones this week, I would assume, just based on how other concussions have kind of gone. So you could have very easily put Larry Borum in there, give Kieran a whole week, and then he can make his first start at home on Sunday. Much more comfortable situation, much more prepared. But yeah, I mean, that. Again, it's the decision making in this organization, right? That you're just kind of like, what are we doing? Where we're just thinking like none of it is cohesive, none of it makes sense, and it's the reason why the Bears are 4-10 right now.
And frankly, the Bears are losing these games in the trenches. I mean, you touched on it. Like, it's the offensive line and the defensive line. Montez Sweat and that defensive line have pretty much disappeared. There's no pressure with 4. Like, it's just not there. And I know they've been banged up with injuries. You lost Billings. Gervon Dexter didn't play in that Vikings game. He might not play this week. He's got a knee injury that happened in the game before that in San Francisco. It's a tough spot. Like, you need to get some pressure with 4, or this defense is never really going to work. It puts a lot of pressure on your back end, and eventually those guys are going to break. I actually do think that the defense did all right for the first half in that game in Minnesota. Like that wasn't really the issue. The issue was that the offense couldn't really get anything going on the other side. And like you said, the score was manageable. Like the Bears made that interesting. They could have gotten back into a one-score game there early in the third quarter, midway through the third quarter, when we saw that Doug Kramer mishap. And yeah, like that's just, it was a mistake by Doug. Like I get it. He should have declared himself eligible. Sure. But how many times are we going to use this formation? And it's hurting them when they're in those goal to go situations. It's hurt them really badly in 2 games now.
Yeah, and it just raises big questions about what to look forward to. You know, I asked about the offensive line. I mean, look at both lines. Who are you comfortable with coming back, like, toward the future at this point? I'd be like, on the defensive line, you're probably like Montez Sweat. Obviously, you've put money in him and that kind of stuff.
You can't get rid of him. Yeah.
No, and you're. I think you would have wanted Javon Dexter to kind of take more of a leap this year. I think you've seen flashes and that sort of stuff. I don't think he took the sophomore jump. Andrew Billings, I don't know what his contract situation is, but other than that, I mean, what is that? 4 guys that you feel relatively comfortable bringing back for the future? Like, these are the most important, they're very important parts of your franchise, both sides of the line. And I can't count on my hand, all the guys that are going to be part of your future moving forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Michael. I mean, you look at the offensive line, and yeah, I mean, Braxton Jones is going to be back. He has another year, but at the same time, you probably want to upgrade that spot. You're probably looking to draft a tackle or a guard or a center or all 3 really high in the draft.
Yeah.
Like, it's never felt more obvious to me what the Bears need to do in the draft. It's attack the trenches. I mean, you could say either side of the ball, but especially that offensive line. If 2 of those top 3 draft, I mean, it's looking like they're going to have 3 picks in roughly the top 40, maybe top 41, 42 picks. If 2 of them aren't offensive linemen, I will be shocked.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I saw Rick ask whether we thought, Poles is going to be, fired at the end of the season. I would, if he didn't do that at the draft and he still had the job, then Kevin Warren would probably fire him, because just based on everything you've seen, you can get a lot of, sure, maybe you could like draft down and get more draft picks because you're going to get the same value in linemen because other people are trying to get, more skill position players, sure, whatever. But you should be investing in the lines with your free agency and with your draft picks in the offseason, because that's the glaring, misses right now. That's stunting, Caleb's growth, and it's really affecting the rest of the defense too. Because you have a talented secondary. Your linebackers are playing okay. I think T.J. Edwards is having a good year. Tremaine Edmonds, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know. That contract is looking pretty bad at this point, but both your lines are really important to both successes on both sides of the field, and you're seeing what's happening right now.
Yeah, you absolutely are. I want to look up here. I mean, yeah, the Tremaine contract, he's a guy that really fits the scheme that they had for Eberflus. And that's right. Really the one you point to where, like, you wonder what the new coach is going to be looking to bring to the table scheme wise on that defensive end. Is Tremaine going to fit that? You don't really know. Like, you can cut him, you can trade him, but I don't think they would cut him. I would think that somebody would want to trade for him. That makes the cap hit not so bad if you wanted to move on from him after this season.
You could get something for him.
You could definitely get something for him. If you did, if there were no buyers, which I'd be surprised, and you did have to cut him, it's a $13 million dead cap hit next year. Which, I mean, they have cap space. It's not the end of the world, but I don't see them doing that. I would think that somebody would trade for him.
Yeah.
If you're joining us live here on YouTube, come join the conversation in the comments. We will throw some of your thoughts and comments up there. If you're listening after the fact on Spotify or Apple, do us a favor, leave us a review, and keep an eye out on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. I apologize, guys, for the throwing the surprise Thursday show in the mix here. I do have a scheduling conflict tomorrow, so we're going a little early today. I see in that you mentioned it, Michael. I'm getting to the comment here from Rick. What are the chances Poles gets fired at the end of the year? I still don't see that because of the quarterback situation. He drafted this quarterback. He basically set this whole thing up over the last 3 years. When you look back to trading the number one pick, 2 years ago, to the way things went down with Justin Fields, basically all to set this up so that he could get his quarterback with that first pick in April of this year, and that's Caleb Williams. I don't see them moving on from him after all of that. I do kind of see them as tied together, at least through the rookie contract, or at least through the next couple of years of that rookie contract.
Yeah, I think, looking at, if you take what Kevin Ward said at face value a couple weeks ago, right? You believe him and you think that he's, being truthful when he says, Ryan is the GM. I do think that Caleb is his saving grace. And I do think that, it's interesting because I feel like every GM, unless things are going terribly wrong, should probably get two coaches, an opportunity. Yeah. And I don't, not to be rude, but I don't think, I think Ryan Poles really liked Matt, and I think he really believed in him and all that kind of stuff. But when you hired Matt Eberflus, I don't think you thought that he was going to be your Super Bowl winning coach, right? Like when that coaching hire happened, it felt at the time like we were all kind of surprised. We were all kind of like, well, that's interesting. No one was really talking to him. No one was really interested in him. And you knew that Ryan Poles was going to, completely just, tear down the roster. So it always felt like it was going to be a coach just to have there, get some experience, get some leadership. So I think the only thing that changes is Kevin Warren fed up with the roster issues or roster holes? And does he just want his own guy, right? Like, does he just want to have his own person that reports to him? And I think that's the only thing that kind of gets him fired at this point. I don't think Ryan Poles is going to resign. This is one of 32 jobs, and quite honestly, if you don't succeed and if you resign and leave a post, I don't think other NFL teams are going to give you a chance to be a general manager. So I don't think he's going to leave on his own accord. I think he feels comfortable that he's got a quarterback. He's got some good skill players. It's pretty simple that you just need to go through the lines and you can repair that pretty quickly. And if you're able to get a Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, a Joe Brady, I think you feel pretty comfortable with where you are at this point because, for how doom and gloom we are, I do think that this is a fairly easy fix because you have the quarterback and because you have a really enticing, place. I know obviously with everything going on with the McCaskies and everything like that, you might be like, well, is it that great? But the biggest hurdle is finding your franchise quarterback. And I think the Bears have that with Caleb Williams. So I think, you do that, you pay some guys, you draft some guys, and I think you can turn this thing around fairly quickly next season.
Well, and you look at the other teams that are on the market or that we think might be on the market for a new coach or even a new GM, like the Jets are all kinds of a mess,
Yeah, you saw that Athletic story today.
They don't have. There's that, the behind the scenes stuff going on, and they don't really have a long-term quarterback plan. And whether or not they bring back Aaron Rodgers, that might be a plan for one more year, but that's not a long-term plan. You look at New Orleans, they're stuck with Derek Carr, and basically they're in cap hell. That's not a very enticing job for those reasons. You're going to have a hard time building a team down there because of they've just been pushing off the problems cap-wise for the last handful of years. Even you think about teams that might be on the market, the Giants. They have to figure out the quarterback situation. They're probably going to be looking to draft somebody. Who else could, maybe the Raiders, same thing. They don't have a quarterback. And so when you're talking about teams that have a quarterback that might be enticing for a head coaching candidate, you're talking about the Bears, and really you're talking about maybe the Jaguars if they move on from Doug Peterson, which it feels like they're going to do. Those are the only two where you're like, yeah, I can win with that quarterback. Every other situation, the answer is either no or who is their quarterback.
Yeah, and it's interesting just watching, you hear about the stuff with Ben Johnson and he's like, well, he has a prerequisite. Does he want his own GM? A lot of coaches now, want to follow the Kyle Shanahan model where they bring in their own GM and kind of are involved. But I am curious, if you're Ben Johnson, if you're, just going with the, Mike Vrabel, Joe Brady, whatever, are you more comfortable are you kind of comfortable being like, well, okay, maybe I don't have a prior working relationship with Ryan Poles, but I
Mhm.
have my franchise quarterback here. And I think that's going to be much easier than maybe having someone I'm more comfortable, have experience working with the GM, but there's a gamble that we will never get the quarterback position right, and I might blow my first chance, right? So I'm curious to see how much that kind of plays a factor in this head coaching search because I think coaches have kind of been rightfully so or not, feel more like they have a right to say how things should be going and that kind of stuff. And, obviously are demanding high salaries. But at the end of the day, I think like you said, there are only so many good opportunities that
Yeah.
you're guaranteed. And there's only a few, and the Bears seem like to be the prettiest one right now.
And Ben Johnson is in the rare position where he can kind of pick what he wants.
Sure.
Like not every potential head coaching candidate has that opportunity. You're talking about, first of all, you're talking about a ton of money. You're talking about
Yeah.
multiple millions of dollars every year of your contract. If the New Orleans Saints come at a coordinator with that type of offer, like you don't get chances to be an NFL head coach all that often.
Yeah.
So I think like Ben Johnson is in the rare position where he could say no last year, and he did. He told the Commanders to turn that flight around and go back home. He wasn't interested anymore, and so not that I would expect him to do that again. Like I do think one of these jobs is going to be enticing to him, potentially the Bears job, but it really does matter like what his impressions are of Ryan Poles and whether or not he's going to be willing to work with a GM who's already there. You wonder like if he's got somebody in the Lions front office in mind as his potential GM, much like Shane and Dayball were both with the Bills. That could be a similar. Not that that's really worked out for them so far, but I'm
Right.
just saying
Yeah.
like that's potentially how some of these guys are thinking.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see, and we'll have plenty of time to break down, coaching candidates and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But going back to Rick's original point, I do, I think I saw, too many. Him saying too many misses with Ryan Poles, not enough hits. I get that. I understand the frustrations with that. But he did, he traded. He got, DJ Moore. He got you a starter right tackle. He got Tyreek Stevenson. I know it hasn't been the great sophomore. I know there's a lot with Stevenson, but he's still a
Yeah.
talented player. So there have been some hits. I think that it's just the biggest thing is realizing from his mistakes and, realizing that he needs to, get the lines fixed and figure
Mhm.
some things out. But I think that would be the biggest thing. And obviously, the other thing with all this, the Bears need to make sure that they extend them. You can't go to a head coaching candidate and be like, well, Ryan Poles actually has 1 year left on his contract, but you're going to have 5. And it's just like, well, what are we supposed to do here? Like the Bears need to make sure that everything's aligned once and make sure that it is all working the way it should be.
That might make too much sense, Michael. I mean,
Well, yeah.
Sometimes the way these NFL owners think doesn't always make a whole lot of sense.
No.
But yeah, you would want that assurance if you're a head coaching candidate. That's for sure. Speaking of Ben Johnson, the Bears play the Lions on Sunday. That doesn't sound like it's going to go well.
I mean, I will say, Sean, if there is a time you want to play the Detroit Lions, it's now. They're basically half their defense is out. Most of their David Montgomery is out. Like
Yeah.
if you want to play them and you want to play spoiler, I mean, this is your opportunity, I guess. I mean,
I just don't love the idea of playing them coming off a Lions loss like that. That scares me a little.
Do you think, like, I know obviously NFL rules don't allow this, but do you think the McCaskies kind of cornered Ben Johnson on his way to Soldier Field and they're just kind of like, listen, like, how much do you want? Like, we'll just give it to you right now. Like, just come coach our team on the other side. Like, I'm just curious to know, like, how much do you like if you're Ben Johnson right now and you're going into this situation. I know you're obviously focused on Detroit. You're trying to win the Super Bowl. You're trying to put your team in the best position to win. But I mean, we're all human. Like, aren't we? Do you think in the back of his mind, he's like, I don't like the way Soldier Field looks this way. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do this. Like, ooh, Caleb missed this throw. If I designed it this way, like, you have to think like he is focused obviously on helping the Lions win. But in the back of his mind, you're probably like, Like I could do some work here if I can just turn things around pretty quickly.
I mean, it's human nature. I think on
Right.
some level, he's got to be thinking that when he walks into the building on Sunday. Yeah, maybe this could be a situation like in baseball when you see those guys traded from
Yeah.
one clubhouse to the other and they walk
Yeah.
across the field between a doubleheader or whatever. Yeah, maybe the Bears can corner Ben Johnson and lock him in a room somewhere in Soldier Field
Yeah.
for the next 3 weeks.
That would be funny. Could you just imagine like Kevin Warren just like stopping in the middle? He's like, tell him like, hey, can you go to this room real quick? This is where the coaches are getting ready. And it's just McCaskey waiting there with like a $15 million contract being like signed right now.
Sign up right now. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, I think he's got to be thinking that. Obviously, they would never admit to that. These guys have a job to do. I
Sure.
get it, but come on. I mean, Kevin Warren bought himself a ticket to the Bears Eagles game a couple of years ago before he took the job. These guys are always thinking about that stuff. So yeah, like I do think that I do agree that this is a good time to get the Lions if you're the Bears. They're banged up. You're playing them outside. Jared Goff outside is not always a good thing. I know he played well in Green Bay earlier this season, but that's always a challenge for a team that plays indoors to come outside in the cold. It looks like it's going to be sunny, but chilly. So hopefully no rain or snow or anything like that. But yeah, this is still a tough situation for the Lions to walk into because the Bears always play the Lions close. I mean, even these last couple of years when the Lions have been really good, even that game where Flus screwed it up at the end a couple of weeks ago, like these games are always close, and I do think that there's a chance that the Bears could keep this thing close. I don't know if I'm ready to go there yet, but I do think that there's a chance. I'm just really uninspired by the last 2 weeks under Thomas Brown.
No, I agree. And I think, that's the biggest thing. Like we've been looking for that push, right? Like that we've been looking for that,
Yeah.
hey, we're not going to get punched around, our coach got fired, all that sort of stuff. And you haven't seen that, right? Like I think I mean, I'm not saying that the guys are giving up, and Thomas Brown the other day kind of fought back about that assertion of the guys, quitting and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So I guess that's good for him, but it's just interesting where it's just kind of like you expect that bump and you just haven't seen that bump at all for some reason. And I'm curious to see whether Detroit now, is able to take advantage of the Bears because Eberflus isn't there. I think Eberflus actually played the Lions pretty well, even though he beat them once last year, but it's always been close with him as the head coach.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just curious. At some point, you just kind of want to see a fight, right? Like
You do.
you're like a lot of these guys, whether it's for the Bears or like in the NFL next year, you're playing for your contract, you're playing for your career, right? And you don't want tape out there of you like giving up or like not trying hard or anything like that because that'll cost you an opportunity, that'll cost you millions, right? So, it stinks. The guys have talked about it. Caleb talked about going through an 8-game losing streak, going through the pain, all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, you just got to keep fighting. And I know that's easy for me to say here in my chair, but
Yeah.
you are playing for a lot, even though you don't have a playoff contention to play for, because this could determine whether you get a spot on a roster next year. This could determine whether you get a couple more millions. Like there's still a lot to play for in these next 3 games.
And it's not just guys who are in the last year of their contract.
Sure.
I mean, you're talking about a new coach coming in.
Yes.
Very few contracts, very few of these players are not expendable. Like, Jalen Johnson is in a position where he just got a ton of money. They can't get rid of that contract next year. You could argue the same with some of the, Cole Kmet and there's a handful of guys who are not going anywhere. Obviously, Caleb's not going anywhere. But yeah, like if you're Tyreek Stevenson, like you're trying to prove yourself for the new coach, frankly, like that's what you're trying to do right now. If you're Kyler Gordon, a guy who's on his rookie deal still, any of those guys, Braxton Jones, if he plays, I do see a comment here from CJ. He says, what's going on with the 3 long-term concussions? Will guardian caps be mandatory next year? I do think that the league is moving that way. Look, the players' issue with the guardian caps is that it looks dumb, and so like eventually the NFL is eventually they'll get over that and say guys need to be wearing these. That's at least how I feel. I think I think the aesthetics, the look of it can't be the deciding factor. But yeah, a lot of guys just don't like the way that it looks. But CJ brings up an interesting point, and I do want to run through the injuries. It's only Thursday. We'll have to wait and see the Friday injury report. But yeah, Ryan Bates still out with a concussion. Braxton Jones still out with a concussion. Like you said, Michael, a lot of these concussions last multiple weeks. I don't know if we're going to get Braxton Jones back this week. But also, like we touched on earlier, like I like Karan Amagaji a lot more if he has a full week of practice with the starters. That I think does matter. Jervon Dexter has been out with a knee injury. Tevin Jenkins was out yesterday with a calf injury. If you're down Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins, that's a little concerning. Roshan Johnson was back at practice. He's another guy who's been dealing with a concussion. Darrell Taylor with a shoulder injury was also back, both full participants. So hopefully you get those two guys back. I think Roshan coming back would be a big boost for the run game. It's been kind of one-dimensional with DeAndre Swift. You look at some of those 3rd and short situations. I wonder if those would have been Roshan Johnson situations last week.
Yeah, you kind of missed him in that game, right? Like, obviously, DeAndre's really good with his athleticism. He can make great cuts and has great speed, but he's not a short, yard back by any means. And you saw a couple times, the sweep. I didn't like the sweep at all on 4th down. I thought that was a weird call, especially running toward your left tackle who's making his first start. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know, Wednesday was a walkthrough, right? So these are just general whatever. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the report looks like. But, you mentioned Kieran, like if he has to start left tackle, I feel much better about this going against the depleted Lions,
True.
defensive line than going against that Minnesota defensive line. Obviously, there's still talented players on that Lions defense, but it's much more comfortable and playing at home as opposed to what he dealt with a week ago.
True. Absolutely true. I'm with you on that. Game within the game, Michael, what's the position matchup, the individual one-on-one matchup? What are you watching this week for Lions versus Bears at Soldier Field?
I'm sticking with my usual. I'm just sticking with Caleb at this point. Okay. That's all I really care about for the rest of the year. I mean, he talked about some frustrations because there was still, he was being chased. He was being pressured a lot, but man, there are still some plays where he just misses, right? Like that Keenan Allen throw that would have been a touchdown. He just said that he, stepped wrong and the momentum made him throw it differently. And, he missed on a couple other plays. And for all the talk about, Caleb's being pressured, he's forcing this and that kind of stuff. He's still missing a lot of throws. And he's one of, I forget what the stat was, but he either leads the league or is somewhere near the top of the league, right, where with missed throws and poor quality throws. So that's what I'm basically looking for. Is he hitting the throws? Is he seeing he's seeing the reads right? He's just not making the throw and the deep threat that well. So that's what I'm looking for. I know this is a not as strong Detroit defense, so maybe you can exploit that a little bit. Maybe go up the middle more. Off the side, I don't know if the deep pass is going to be there based on your protection, but I'm looking for Caleb to hit on his passes and, be there in the moment as opposed to, missing a guy or having miscommunication, because at this point, 14 games into the season, those things are going to happen, but I feel like they're still happening at a much higher rate than Bears fans want them to.
Yeah, I think that's obviously we're all tuning in to watch Caleb Williams and see how he does. 15 pressures last week for the Vikings. I mean, it's hard to when you're thrown off your rhythm like that and you have to run for your life and you're throwing from weird angles and stuff. It's tough. Like you do have to keep that in mind when you're talking about the accuracy. Like it's hard to do that with guys in your face. It's 15 pressures and only 2 sacks is actually pretty good. And that shows you that he was getting out of the way quite a bit. But yeah, that's obviously not good if your quarterback's pressured that much. I'm certainly going to be watching Caleb as well. My game within the game pick, though, was Bears versus the first half, particularly on the offensive end. Like, are these guys ever going to score a point in the first half? It's been 3 consecutive games. They've been scoreless through the first 2 quarters. That was including the Thanksgiving game and the last 2 games under Thomas Brown. I do think that's got to change at some point. I think they're going to find the end zone here in the first half. Dare I say first quarter? Um, you're at home. Maybe this is an opportunity where you change things up and you take the ball first. They haven't really done that this year.
Yeah.
But I mean, they also haven't had any success in that first half. So maybe it's time to change something up there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. Like anytime anyone is asked about that, right? The answer is, well, if we knew, we would fix it. It's like, well, yeah, duh. But like, can't you see any? Like, there has to be something, right? Like, there has to be like, I've seen the reporting about it. Obviously, the first down runs have not been great. You haven't gotten a lot of that, and that obviously snowballs into longer second and third yard down passes. But at some point, you just figure you kind of get lucky, right? And you just kind of like, all right,
Yeah.
maybe they're not ready yet, or like they're still trying to get in the groove of the game. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see because eventually you can't play comeback the entire time, right? You can't just play like we're going to throw the ball. Caleb's going to end up close with 300 yards, but most of that was just, in garbage time when it didn't really matter, right? Like at some point you just want to see these guys, lead a drive and you want them to score first, right? They have not have they had the lead first yet in this season, or is like it's very low or something like that?
Very few times.
Yeah, like take the lead early for once.
Yeah, right. And you talk about the game script, and it's funny. Like I remember we were talking with Cole Kmet. This was way earlier in the season about game scripts early in the game, and this was back when Shane Waldron was still the coordinator, and that was a topic of conversation. And I think one of the things Cole said was like, well, yeah, you can have a game script, but if your first possession starts at the 2-yard line, like you're throwing the game script out. If this or there's all these different scenarios that could screw up what you thought you were going to do. And to me, it's like, well, here's one solution. Why don't you take the ball first and then you'll probably have the ball at the 30-yard line and you know exactly what's going to happen. But again, I know that you got to win the coin toss to do that. And also that would be a change in tactic from the coaching staff. Yeah, I gotta think at some point they're going to break through and score some points in the first quarter. I would think that they would want to take the lead first, but it's been tough. Hopefully you don't have a situation where you're losing your left tackle the day before the game. I think that did really hurt them last week. Okay, our most valuable Bear. If you're with us here live, throw your most valuable Bear in the chat. We'll throw them up on the screen. Just to recap, I went with Keenan Allen last week. You went with DJ Moore, Michael. Keenan Allen scored 17 fantasy points. DJ scored only 11, so that's a win for me. I'm back in the victory column. That pulls us even through 14 games. We are 7-7 in our best of 17 series here. It's getting interesting. We got 3 games left. Michael, you get to pick first this week. Who is your most valuable Bear?
And I have one more Caleb pick, and I'm trying to decide which game. I'm not going to use him for the Packers, mostly because I'm not sure if they might not play him or something like that. I don't want to.
Something weird could happen. That's true.
Yeah, so I either have to use them this week or I have to use them against the Seahawks. And this Lions defense is kind of it's hurting a little bit, but maybe I want the Seahawks. I think I'll go with the Seahawks mostly because it's the day after Christmas. Maybe the defense isn't 100%. I know that could probably lead to the Bears, or maybe not looking as good as well. But I'm going to place that bet there. So I'm going to go with. I think that
Rick wants you to take Caleb. Just throwing that out there. not to sway your.
I'm going to stick with him with the Seahawks, and I'll come to regret it, I'm sure, when I'm going to lose at the end of the season. I'm just trying to decide if I want DeAndre Swift to burn me again this year, or whether I want DJ Moore to burn me again this year. Both running backs now, apparently. By the way, DJ Moore is more of a running back at this point than anything else. But I think I'll go with DJ Moore mostly because I think that they're using him more in the run game, and I think with this depleted defense, I think that you can maybe do some more screen passes to DJ and kind of get him more opportunities and open field opportunities. So I'm going to go with DJ. I think that hasn't had a great season by any means. I think he's going to have his worst season in his career, but I think this could be a good opportunity for him to get involved, especially if they're going to use him as a runner.
CJ likes Keenan Allen. I went with Keenan. I've actually gone with Keenan the last 2 weeks, and man, here's the thing. Like, I don't think I can take anybody on the defensive side in this game against this
No.
Lions offense. Like it's been a few weeks since either of us took a defender, and it's like I just don't trust that side of the ball against this offense. I don't think Montez Sweat has been very quiet the last handful of weeks. I don't have any Caleb Williams picks left, so I can't swoop in and take him. Although I mean, this Lions defense does give up some yards through the air. They're not particularly great in that area. But I can't go with Caleb. So I'm gonna go with a receiver. It was interesting. I had to wait and see who you picked. I think DJ Moore was at the top of my list this week. With him off the board, you're taking DJ. I mean, that leaves me with Keenan or Rome or I guess Cole Kmet, but he's another guy who's been really, really quiet. I have a hard time seeing that being a victory for me. So I think
there's DeAndre.
DeAndre Swift.
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm going to take a pass. You know what? If he goes off for 20 points, I will be perfectly okay with that. I'm going back to the well. I'm going Keenan Allen for the third week in a row. I didn't draw it up that way when I picked him 3 weeks ago, but you know what? It worked out for me last week. Why not?
Yeah, why not? And, maybe he won't drop a couple more passes and you can even have more points, right? Like that.
Yeah.
He's been there, and I think Caleb has relied on him. And he may have had a really impressive, catch down the sideline. But I think that's consistent. I agree with you defensively. I'm not comfortable with anyone on that defense. Montez Sweat is getting no pressures, no hits, no sacks. I can't guarantee. Someone's going to get an interception, though. So that's something like you're guaranteed a pick. But who are you going to choose at that point?
That's really tough. I've done that a few times, taking some defensive backs, just trying to figure out which one of those 4 or 5 guys is going to get a pick, and it's hard. What's your surprise prediction, Michael? You got anything in mind as you look at this game?
It's been a running joke at this point, but I'm doing this for the hype because he got his first catch last week. Tyler Scott got a late catch. And I think you're at the point where you want to see what you have on the roster, right? Yeah. So I think Tyler Scott will be more involved, especially with DeAndre Carter out. It's going to be cold out there. I'm not wishing injury on anyone by any means, but something could happen, a hamstring or anything like that, just with the cold weather. So I think Tyler Scott actually comes up with a couple catches for more than 10 yards. So I think he'll get involved a little bit. And I think, I know Thomas Brown said, he's not going to, start putting the young guys in youth movement or anything like that. But I do think that Ryan Poles wants to see what he has here. So I think Tyler Scott will get some looks just to kind of see what he can do.
I like that. I think they should give him more looks. You're right. It's the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I mean, you should give him more looks when Caleb's playing, don't wait until you move on to Tyson Bagent for maybe week 18 or something like that.
Rick's coming after me today.
Yeah. Rick says,
you're just mad that
Tyler Scott's going to be inactive. I hope he's not inactive, especially with Carter out. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. I already hinted at my surprise prediction earlier. I'm saying the Bears score in the first quarter, which sadly would be a surprise these days.
Yeah, it would. I mean, at this point, I think there would be like, a Bronx cheer or something like that. If they scored, like people are going to go crazy. I could see that. Going with that, what do you think the crowd's going to be like on Sunday? Is it like going to be like it's supposed to be like 29? Are Bears fans? I know Bears fans are good and they support their guys and all that kind of stuff. But I remember some late December games in the last couple of years where we've seen some half-empty stands.
I think the crowd on Sunday is going to be good because it's a Sunday, it's a day game. I think.
Sure.
Here's another thing, like. I don't know if you looked at tickets for the Lions home games. Tickets have been very expensive. When they played at Indianapolis, tickets were very expensive. I think there might be a fair amount of Lions fans at this game, just because it's drivable, it's close.
Yeah,
people have time off during the holidays.
Sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fair amount of Lions fans there. I would be more worried about the December 26th night game. I don't know what the forecast is for that, but I just feel like cold, dark. Day after Christmas, I don't know if Bears fans are going to be showing out for that. I could be wrong. Maybe people are excited about a primetime game.
It'll be 43, so it'll be warmish for
Okay, is that the
December.
forecast?
So
That's not bad.
that's not bad. It's
That's
the day
not
after
bad.
Christmas, so people will be off, I guess, or
I guess
whatever.
people will be off. I suppose if the forecast was really cold, that would be a different story. There was that game against the Bills
Oh
2
yeah,
years ago. Was that Christmas Eve?
it was like
Possibly
Christmas Eve. Yeah,
when it was like 0 degrees. That was
yeah.
not a great crowd, but you wouldn't expect it to be. Michael, score prediction. What you got?
I don't know. Let's go. I'm kind of in the. I think the Bears will be competitive in this game. For some reason, they're competitive for the most part in these division games. The Vikings kind of broke the game loose in the late third quarter and the fourth quarter. But I think that the Lions win this one. I'll go with I don't think the offense will look good as great in the cold. Watch that happen. I'll go with the 27-20, 21 win for the Lions. You get a missed extra point there, but I do think the Lions will win.
We are almost spot on here. I'm with you. I think because they're at home, outside in the cold, I think they will make this a game. I have Lions 28, Bears 20. I do think that it will be close. Maybe, probably never really feel like the Bears are going to win. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they made it close against the Vikings at Soldier Field. I do think that home field advantage matters and that they will be able to keep this one close. CJ has a 21-17. He thinks Cole Kmet gets going early, and the Bears defense finds the end zone. Hey, that could happen.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. We got 27-24 Bears in an upset, Rick says. Any other guys out there want to throw your score in the chat before we got to get out of here? Thank you, everyone, for joining us live here on YouTube. Do us a favor and hit the thumbs up. That is a great way to support the show. We would really appreciate that. Like and subscribe if you're listening on Spotify or Apple. Keep an eye out on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. As always, head to shawlocal.com. That's the best way to support us. shawlocal.com. Go read our work there, and please consider subscribing. That is the number one way to support us. He's Michael Dwojak. You can find him on Twitter at mdwojak94. I am Sean Hammond. You can find me at Sean_Hammond. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. When we throw a wrench in the schedule and go on a Thursday, we will be sure to let you guys know. Thanks again for joining us. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast, and we will catch up with you guys next time.